What is up guys, Blue Spooky here with another daily video. If you guys are enjoying these daily videos, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you feel so inclined. Doing any of these, let alone all three, helps the videos to do well and ensures I can keep making these types of videos for a long time to come. If you guys are curious about any censored words in the video, I've been getting a lot of flags for inappropriate language, quote-unquote, recently, so I'm doing my best to ensure that I don't get flagged. Because I've been getting flagged pretty much immediately when I post a video, it has been affecting the channel a little bit. So if you'd like to support the channel even further, go ahead and click that join button below the subscribe button. It's only $2 a month, and you get a special symbol next to your name when you comment, and you get to use special emoticons as well. No content will ever be locked behind a paywall, of course. It's completely optional, and only if you'd like to support the channel further than you already do. Just watching this video is enough already. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the video. I'll see you again at the end. Have a great day. I remember that in my 5th grade class, I went on a field trip to this nature park. I don't recall exactly which park it was. It was probably about 20 minutes away from my school. There was a walking path, but it wasn't really that long, and the park was not necessarily for hiking. It was more for looking at the waterfall and river that was there. There were different levels of it, and a lot of overlooked places and stuff like that. When we got there, I remember we went to the building, and somebody talked to us for a while. It was just my class of roughly about 30 kids and our teacher. We then walked around to the different places on some of the trails. After that, we had some time to walk around on our own and look at some of the cool spots that were there. There was a kid I was sort of friends with that I was kind of hanging out with. Well, while we were there wasn't really anybody else in the park other than our class. I did notice like one random person here or there, but there weren't really that many. After walking around and being there for about an hour or so, I remember I went off with my friend. We were just randomly wandering around, going to different viewpoints to see what we could find. I think we would be leaving to go back to school in about 30 minutes or so. It was when we were out wandering around that I noticed this other kid our age. However, he was not in our class. The kid kind of walked near my friend and I, but didn't really say anything. Obviously, I did not know anything about this child, but I assumed that maybe he was there with his parents or something. My friend and I eventually walked off, and I remember the kid began to follow us. He didn't walk real close or anything, but he was trailing us a ways back. We walked around for another good 20 minutes or so, and every place that we went, the kid seemed to be just a little ways behind us. It certainly was a little bit odd. We mostly just ignored him. Eventually, it was time for us to meet back up with the rest of the class, so we went back over. The teacher took attendance near the bus in the parking lot, and we all started to climb on. It was at this time when I noticed the kid again. He was walking over from the other end of the lot. To my surprise, the kid walked up right behind me and got on the bus as well. I was one of the last kids to get in line. My teacher, I think, was talking to another student a ways away, so the kid just blended right in and climbed on the bus with me. As you might imagine, this was very confusing for me. I was really close to just turning around and asking this kid who he was, but I didn't do so. The kid proceeded to sit in the farthest seat in the back. I was shocked and 100% certain he was not in my class and did not go to my school either. He didn't attempt to talk to anyone. He just got onto the seat at the very back and didn't say anything. We went back to school. After arriving, everybody got off the bus. I purposefully looked around to try and find the kid after getting off. When I found him, I saw him exit the bus and walk behind it, away from the rest of the class. We all had to go inside the school, and once inside, the teacher took attendance again. The kid was obviously gone now, and I was still trying to figure out why he'd followed us to school. I went on with the school day and continued with my classes. After school, I got out and I left. This was probably an hour after we got back from the field trip. During this time, I would be riding another bus home. When I left school to try and catch that bus, I noticed the kid again. He was just standing around by a tree outside the school. It looked like he was sort of hiding behind it. I honestly don't know what he was doing. I left, and after that, I never did see him again. To this day, that whole event still puzzles me. Why did he follow me and my friend? Why did he come to my school with me? I have no idea. I'm a woman, and this is something that happened a while back while I was in high school. It was almost 10 years ago, and this was pretty early on into the school year. Randomly, one day, I saw that I got added by somebody new on Snapchat. I checked, and it was some guy named Michael something. I didn't recognize his last name at all, and I didn't think I knew him, so I did not add him back. I simply deleted the request. Just a few days later, though, I got added on Snapchat by him again. Once more, I deleted this mystery guy. Just a few days after the second time I deleted him, though, I realized that he actually was in one of my classes and went to my school. I had never talked to him before, and he sat in the back middle of one of my classes, while I sat more toward the front and over to one side. Because of this, I had never really interacted with or noticed him much, but I did recognize his name eventually. He was a new student in the school, and prior to that class, I'd never seen him before. Well, he added me again for a third time. This time, I decided to add him back just because I knew that he actually went to school with me now. I still really didn't know anything about him, though, other than that I was a bit surprised that he kept on adding me over and over, even after I would not add him back. We weren't friends or anything, so finally adding him was something I would quickly come to regret, though. I think it was the very next day. Early on in the school day, he sent me pictures of himself. Basically just a selfie pretty much, with no words or captions or anything. I responded, sending one back, but then he sent me 5 random pictures. We were both in different classes at the time. Some he took of other students, and some were just random photos of the floor or whatever object. I opened them up and did not reply. It seemed kind of weird, and I didn't really know what to say. Later on in the day, we had class together. This teacher did not like it when students would be on their phone during class, so I didn't go on my phone at all during the class period. Not until the very end when we were done, and all waiting for the bell to ring. When I turned on my phone, I saw there were tons of notifications from Snapchat. This Michael guy especially. I looked, and he'd literally sent me at least 20 photos. I opened them all quickly, going from one to the next. They were all pictures of me that he'd taken from where he was sitting. I found this pretty creepy. After opening them all and not responding, I decided to confront him in person. The bell rang, but at that point I caught up with him, outside of the classroom in the hallway. I asked him why he was snapping photos of me in class. He didn't say anything. He just stood there staring at me with this unsettling, dead-eyed look. I told him I thought it was really weird, and I was going to tell him not to do it again, but before I could do so, he just turned around and ran away. It was extremely strange. Michael was now seeming like more and more of a weirdo to me. I decided to delete him off of Snapchat. A few days went by, and I did see him in class, but I didn't talk to him or anything. He tried to add me again on Snapchat for a 4th time. This time, I actually blocked him. I really didn't want anything to do with this weird guy. Well, that very same day, I left school when it was over. I drove to and from school and had a car during this time. I remember that as I left school and began on my way home, I noticed that Michael was driving right behind me. This had never happened before, and once I noticed this, I was immediately suspicious. When I'd made it about halfway home, he was still right behind me. I didn't think that he lived anywhere near me, and I figured that based on his previous behavior, he was possibly following me. When I made it almost all the way home, he was still there. After making it less than a mile away from my house, I did not want to go any further. I pulled over to the side of the street. Michael slowed down in his car behind me, but did not pull over. Ultimately, he ended up driving past me and kept going. Once he was out of sight, I then drove home. I really didn't know what to do about this whole deal. Over the next few days, I noticed Michael in class, staring at me. I completely ignored him, and luckily he didn't try to interact with me in any way. He also did not add me again on Snapchat or try following me home again. Probably a week or two after this happened, I stopped seeing him in class altogether. Eventually I asked around, and I found out that he'd gotten changed schools or something. I'm glad that he did. The whole situation is something I'd like to forget ever happened. I live with my wife in a house, and we have about a half acre of land total. There's a garage that's attached to the house where I store a lot of my things. We also have a lot of neighbors, and we all have the same size houses and yards just about. It's pretty common for people to have yard sales during the summertime. My wife and I had one a few years back actually, but it's not something that we do a whole lot. Living in a large neighborhood though, sometimes we'll go and check out the other ones in the area. Last year, our neighbors just down the street were having one such yard sale. The man who lived there, Dave, had always been decently friendly with me, and I had spoken with him several times. We were not the best of friends or anything, but we had been to each other's places once or twice at least. I know that Dave gave me a hand when I was working on my car at one point. His wife was also friendly with my wife. When we saw that they were having a yard sale, we decided to stop by and check it out. Their yard sale was going on over the whole weekend, so on Friday afternoon we walked on over. I saw they had a bunch of things out in the driveway, and also many things on some tables in the garage. We were checking out the sale and entered the garage area. I noticed there was a really nice tool set for sale, the same kind as the one I had. That's why I picked it up and began to look at it. When I did, I noticed it had this sticker on it just like mine, and the sticker was not originally on the box. I had put it on the bottom of it several years ago. I was sure this had to be my tool set. I thought back to the last time I had used it. It had been a couple of months. My garage had a lot of things in it, and it was not super cluttered, but it did have a decent amount of junk in there. I put it back down. I didn't want to immediately accuse Dave of stealing from me. After all, I wasn't sure yet. He was talking with someone and didn't notice me looking at it, so I kept looking at his other things for sale. I also noticed that he had a digital air filter for sale, which was just like the one I had. Maybe he just happened to have the same one, but the thought of it being mine did occur to me. I also noticed him having two other things that I also had in my garage. I was now getting very suspicious. My wife was talking with Dave and his wife. I went over and joined in. I didn't bring up him having the same things and wished him the best of luck with his yard sale. We walked back to our house, and on the way back, I told my wife about my suspicions. She said I was crazy, and there was no way Dave had stolen from us. But I knew that sticker was on my tool set. I was lucky I'd even noticed those things at all, because they had quite a few items for sale. After we made it back, I went straight for the garage and looked through all my things. I couldn't find the items I'd seen at his sale anywhere. I couldn't believe it. I would never have suspected that Dave would steal from me, but I didn't know how else to explain it. The next day, I went back over to Dave's. He had sold a couple of the things that were mine, but luckily the tool set was still there, and that was the most valuable. He was selling it for $75. I had bought it for about $200. I brought up the tool set to Dave and confronted him. He denied everything, said I must have lost my mind. He would never steal from me. When I brought up the unique sticker, he didn't have an explanation, said he got it as a gift, and whoever gave it to him must have put it on there. He seriously expected me to believe it was all a coincidence. I said I was taking it back, but Dave said I couldn't have it unless I paid the $75. I should have just taken it. I put it back and left. I walked home and once more looked through my garage. The things still weren't there, and I knew for sure he'd stolen them. After that, I decided I didn't want anything to do with Dave anymore. We stopped being friendly with each other. I wondered how he'd even gotten those things from me without me knowing. And that was when I realized I would usually leave the back door to the garage unlocked. Our neighborhood is quiet and usually very safe. The door opened to the backyard as well, which was completely fenced in. Because of that, I thought it was secure and never bothered to lock it. Dave knew this from when he had been in my garage. He must have jumped the fence and entered my garage when we weren't there. I don't know when or how exactly he did it and managed to catch us unawares, but it creeps me out to think he entered our home and stole from us when we weren't there. I used to live in this old apartment building. My name is Sabrina, by the way, and this took place about 5 years ago now. My place had 1 bedroom and 1.5 bathrooms. Overall, it was not the greatest or most luxurious, but I didn't mind it at all. I was on the 2nd floor, and there were loads of other people living in the building. Several months after I'd started living there, I got a new next-door neighbor whose name was Arthur. He was a creep almost from the very start. The way that he even met me was strange enough to set me on edge. I left my apartment and was walking down the hallway when he just came up from behind me and grabbed my shoulder. He introduced himself, and it was really awkward. He told me that he lived next door and all that stuff. From that point, though, I simply thought he was just an awkward guy. After interacting with him a couple more times, though, he didn't really seem shy or anything. In fact, the next time I saw him, he was just standing out in the hallway, not really going anywhere. When I left my place, he immediately approached me and asked me if I wanted to come over to his. I said I was busy and I had to be somewhere. I declined. After this, Arthur tried to ask me out a couple of times. He would always be waiting for me in the hallway. I said no each time. He struck me as more than a little odd, and there was an unsettling air about him. All of these interactions with him happened within just the first month that he lived there, by the way. Eventually, it started to get very annoying. It seemed like half the time I left my house, he would immediately leave his right after me, or already be there in the hallway waiting for me. One night, I was in my apartment and went to take out my trash. We did not have a trash chute on my floor. We had to walk all the way down to the basement to take it out. I put on my flip-flops and left my place. I walked down to the basement and was gone for 2 or 3 minutes at most. When I returned to my apartment and went back inside of it, it was kind of late. I was tired, so I decided to get ready for bed. I wasn't necessarily planning on going to sleep right away. Probably I'd just watch some shows in bed. I started to go around and turn all the lights off in my place. When I passed by my broom closet, though, I was absolutely certain I'd just heard a noise inside of it. And that was very weird. I didn't know what that could be. The last thing I was expecting was for a person to be in there. But when I opened the door to check, I saw Arthur standing right inside of it. I jumped back and started running for my bedroom. Arthur emerged from the broom closet and actually started chasing me. After I got inside my bedroom, I slammed the door shut, but I didn't have enough time to lock it. Arthur slammed into the door within seconds. I saw him frantically trying to open it. I had the half bathroom attached to my bedroom, so I ran for that door. I got inside and shut the door behind me. It was just after Arthur had managed to throw open the door to my bedroom This door had a slightly different lock, and so I was able to lock it in time before Arthur reached me. He began slamming against the door and trying to open it, banging on it furiously. Fortunately, I had my cell phone in my pocket, so I dialed 911 as fast as I could. Neither Arthur nor me said anything in this time. After trying to open the bathroom door multiple times, Arthur started banging on it even harder. I finally spoke to him and yelled that I was on the phone with the police. I talked to the 911 operator and told her exactly what was going on. At that point, Arthur just calmly walked away from the bathroom door. I couldn't tell if he'd actually left my apartment yet, though, or was just waiting in the other room to me. I stayed hidden in the bathroom for what felt like forever. I was waiting until the police showed up. In that time, I didn't hear anything, and when they got there, I came out of the bathroom. Arthur was nowhere to be seen in my apartment. I told the police where he lived, which was obviously right next door. Arthur had left, though. Eventually, the police were able to locate him. Apparently, he'd been in similar trouble in the past and had a bit of a history with this sort of thing. Obviously, I'd neglected to lock my door when I went to take out the trash that night. Arthur must have slipped inside and hidden my closet while I was away. I'm glad that I found him when I did, because who knows what he would have done to me if I'd actually gone to sleep. That made for one of the scariest moments of my life for sure. A couple of years ago, I bought a gaming computer on Facebook Marketplace. I've been wanting to buy one for a while, and I knew that they're typically very expensive. That gave me the idea to go on Facebook Marketplace and look for a used one. After several days of searching, I found one that I wanted. I decided to reach out to the seller and ask a little more information about it. The seller was a guy named Jeremy. We went back and forth a little bit, and I decided that I wanted to buy it. It was a pretty good deal, so we agreed on a day that I would go over and get the computer from him. It also came with a monitor, keyboard, and mouse as well. After I bought it, I took it home, set it up, and started using it. I was happy with my purchase, and I used the computer for the next week and a half. That was when I suddenly got another message on Facebook from Jeremy, who said he wanted his computer back. I was very confused when I saw this. Obviously, he'd just sold it to me a week before. He said that he'd changed his mind and wanted it back now. I didn't want to return it. I liked the computer, and I'd already installed several games and other personal programs and photos onto it. I told Jeremy no, I was not going to return it. Jeremy said he would give me a certain amount of money for it. Funny thing is, the amount he offered was less than I'd paid for the computer in the first place, by a few $100s. I pointed that out, and he said it was all he could afford to give. Now, when he originally said he wanted it back, I assumed that meant he would pay full price. Obviously, the answer was still no. I was really annoyed that this guy was trying to snatch the computer back from me, and even more annoyed that he wasn't even offering the full price I'd paid for it. If he didn't want to sell it, then he shouldn't have sold it to me. Jeremy was not very happy that I refused to give the computer back to him. He sent me a friend request on Facebook and started messaging me a bunch of times. I ignored him for a while, but after he kept up for 3 days straight, I finally blocked him. I thought that was that. This situation was strange enough already, but unfortunately, that was not the end of Jeremy. Probably about a week later, after I'd blocked Jeremy, he showed up to my house. I happened to be home alone and was in my bedroom on the very same gaming computer I'd bought from him. It was nighttime, and about 8 p.m. or so. It was completely dark out when I heard a furious knocking on the front door. I got up and left my room and went over to the living room. I looked out the front window only to see Jeremy right there on the front step. I recognized him from when I bought the computer. How did he know where I lived? This was really strange. I watched him stand there and knock again on the front door. I was wondering what on earth he had planned. Did he think by just showing up at my house unannounced that would make me change my mind? I stayed in the living room and ignored his knocks, hoping he would just go away. Most of the lights in my house were off already, so maybe he would think I wasn't home. I watched Jeremy hang around the front step for several more minutes. As I was looking around, I had to move back away from the window so he wouldn't notice me. He came back and knocked again on the front door, this time much louder. He yelled, asking for me to come outside. I still ignored him. I walked back to my bedroom, hoping he would eventually give up and leave. When I got back to my room, I put in some headphones and sat back down at my computer. For the next 5 minutes or so, everything was fine. Suddenly, I heard a knocking sound. I took out my headphones and looked to the direction of my window. Jeremy was standing there, peeking into my bedroom. I got up and ran over to the window. I closed the blinds. Jeremy began yelling at me, but he was so furious that I couldn't even really understand what he was saying. I left my bedroom and went back toward the living room. At that time, Jeremy dashed back toward my front door and started tugging and banging on it. Again, I went over to the door and shouted at him that I was going to call the police. Jeremy screamed at me to give the computer back right now. I called the police and told them what was going on. Jeremy still was not leaving. He continued to stay there, even after I got off the phone with the police. Unfortunately, he fled just moments before they got there. I talked to them and gave them a description of Jeremy and told them my side of the story. After that, the police left and said to call back if Jeremy ever returned. I was afraid that he would, but luckily he did not. I have a hard time believing how crazy it all was, and I can't believe that all actually happened over something that he sold me. Last summer, I took a road trip to visit a couple friends I went to high school with. They went to college out in Florida, and since moved there after graduating. Every summer, I try to go there at least once and visit, because we've always been the best of friends. Last year, I drove, because there were a lot of places along the way that I wanted to go to. Many were parks or cool destinations to do some sightseeing. It would take a few days for the entire drive, so I left early to be able to stop off at places I wanted to. The first couple days of the trip went super well, but on the third day I was hoping to arrive, I found myself still driving at night. I had a few hours left to go, and it was about 9 or 10 p.m. By now, the roads were quiet, which was pretty nice. I was looking forward to arriving at my friend's place. I had plenty of fuel, but I needed to use the restroom and wanted to stop and get something to drink as well. I decided to stop off at the next exit, whatever it may be. Well, there was a rest stop just a few miles up the road. I pulled off the highway straight into the rest area. Now, this one was very small. It was not one of those big rest stops that has a truck stop and a gas station and all those restaurants attached. It was one fairly small building with a single row of parking out front. When I got there, I noticed it was extremely dark, and there appeared to be nobody else around at all. I parked my car and got out, then started walking to the building. I took my time and stopped to stretch a little. I had been driving for such a long time. I remember, though, that as I was walking into the building, I did hear a car entering the rest stop from the highway. I looked around inside of the rest stop building, which had a small area where brochures and vending machines were. Then there was a hallway with a janitor's closet and a men's restroom on one side and a woman's restroom on the other. I looked at one of the vending machines for a moment. I turned around and noticed that the car that had entered the rest stop was parking right next to mine. I found this to be a little bit odd, with all the other open spaces around. I went into the restroom and was back out within only a minute or so. I noticed the car was still parked next to mine and had its lights on as well. It appeared that the driver was still inside the vehicle. This sort of made me wonder what they were doing, but overall it didn't seem like a huge deal or any of my business really. I turned my attention back to the vending machine and tried to decide what to get. Eventually, I picked and grabbed my drink, then looked back at my car. The one next to mine was still running. I started walking to head out, but just a few feet from the door, the engine to the car next to mine turned off, and the driver's door opened. A man stepped out, and I stopped where I was near the doorway. The man then started walking toward my car instead of going into the rest stop. Now, this was really weird. The man walked around my car and went behind it, where I couldn't see him. He almost seemed to crouch down as well. I kept watching and could no longer see him. It appeared the man was attempting to hide behind my car for some reason, or possibly he was attempting to break in or something. I didn't want to go out and confront him directly, so I stayed where I was and watched for several minutes. I was expecting to see the man pop up again at any moment, but he didn't do so. Apparently, he was still hiding behind my vehicle. Finally, I decided to go out and see what he was doing. I walked out of the building and got within 20 feet of the two cars. I still couldn't see the man at all, but I was sure that he was there somewhere. I called out to him, asking what was going on, but I didn't receive any response. Now, I didn't even want to go to my car. I was afraid this was some kind of trap or something. I walked back to the rest stop and went inside. Once I was in there, I continued to watch, but I didn't see anything for several minutes. I wasn't exactly sure what to do right now. I just started walking around the small rest stop. I remember I made my way down the hallway. It was at the back end and between the two bathrooms, sort of near the janitor's closet. I was right in that area. That was when I heard the main door to the rest stop open. That had to be the man that was hiding behind my car. I would have been able to hear if another car had driven in. There was luckily a rear exit to the rest stop, so I rushed over to it and left the building. I walked as fast as I could back around toward my car. I even cut through the grass and headed to the sidewalk. As I was doing this, I heard the front door to the rest stop building open again. I looked over and saw the man leaving, walking very quickly in my direction. I started sprinting toward my car and was able to make it there in time. I then left as fast as possible. The man made it back to his own vehicle and got inside of it, but by then I was already driving off. As soon as I made it back onto the highway, I took the very first exit I could see. In the rearview mirror, I could see the guy getting onto the highway from the rest stop, a long distance away. After taking my exit, I was able to lose the guy by going down some other streets. After I got back to the highway once more, I called the police and reported what just happened. I think that man's behavior was really suspicious. I'm not sure what specifically he wanted, but I'm glad I was able to get away from him. Have you ever experienced ice fog or freezing fog before? It's a lot different than just regular old fog. It's also pretty damn rare. It has to be very, very cold and very humid outside for it to even occur. But when it does, it's usually a lot thicker and harder to see through than regular fog is. Freezing fog is not as bad as ice fog though, since it's still a liquid and doesn't completely freeze solid. It can still be very difficult to navigate through though, if you just so happen to be out and about in it. When this story happened, it wasn't as easy to get weather forecasts as it is now. Although the temperature didn't fluctuate as much as it seems to nowadays, it still would occasionally. So it was not an unheard of experience to get caught in bad weather simply because you hadn't been informed. I was a teenager when this story happened. I was over at my cousin's house and we were playing Nintendo games all day and well into the night as well. Before I'd even realized it had already gotten pretty late, and I knew I had to start heading on my way home. We lived out in the country, more or less. We lived in old family homes that had been passed down from generation to generation, which is pretty common in my country. That's just like cold weather is very common in my country too. Normally though, if I was over at my cousin's house, I would ride my bike home after we got done. On this night though, I didn't feel safe riding my bike. When I went out the door and saw that thick, freezing fog, I didn't feel safe navigating my bike home in that. I decided it made more sense to walk home with my bike in tow. It was pretty unlikely I would come across a car or anything out on that old road, but if an animal were to come out in front of me, I could at least scare them away with my bike and not have to risk running into them while riding. I left to walk home to my own house. It had to be sometime past midnight if I recall correctly. Now, when you think country, we didn't live in an area that was surrounded by gigantic thick trees or anything like that. It would actually be probably more what you'd refer to as a moorland. It was a hilly area that didn't really have a lot of vegetation, just some grass and some shrubs here and there. There were also very few houses about in this area. You could look out across the entire moorland during the daytime and likely not see any buildings at all. Basically, it was a very barren and quiet area. There wasn't a lot I could see as I was walking. The moon was not particularly bright that night, as far as I could tell, so I could only see so much as I was walking around. This gave the walk a completely different ambiance than normal. I had never been so nervous walking home before in the dark. There was just something about that fog and that night. I'm not sure if it was the sounds or lack of sound in the air, the lack of visuals, or maybe some hidden sense beyond those things, but I could tell that something was not feeling right. I had even walked home before while my bike was broken, but I wasn't really sure how long it would take me to make this time. I was so used to riding my bike all the time. This night, everything seemed to be going at a snail's pace. Something about this atmosphere was so weird. It was quiet, dark, and cold outside. I could almost feel the fog on me. I began wondering how much colder it would have to get to start to turn into ice crystals. I had experienced it before, and that would make things even harder. I was walking along the side of the road at this point, which had iced up pretty badly too. There was another good reason to not be riding my bicycle in the dark that night. Suddenly though, as I was walking along, I began to hear this sound. It was coming from right in front of me, but because it was so quiet outside, I couldn't exactly tell how far away it was. It was definitely the sound of someone else walking down the road too though. I could hear their footsteps tapping. Normally, if I had seen someone walking down the road, I wouldn't give it that much thought, even this late at night. I would simply give them a wave once I saw them and we'd go our separate ways. I don't know if it was because of the atmosphere or because of the weather conditions this night, but something felt really off about this to me. I had no real reason to feel fear or apprehension, but I began feeling it nonetheless. I was able to hear the tipping and tapping getting louder and louder as the other walker and I began approaching each other. I felt myself getting more and more nervous, probably because I couldn't even see this person yet. I squinted off into the darkness to try and see if I could make out something coming towards me. However, at no point yet had I been able to see anything. That was when the strangest thing happened. I had been hearing the tipping and tapping of those steps for quite a while at that point, when suddenly they stopped altogether. I thought at first that whoever had been walking towards me must have just stopped for a moment. Still, as I walked forward though, I didn't come across anyone, and I didn't hear the walking noises start up either. Honestly, I was just confused. I kept thinking I was right about to come across someone just appearing from the darkness. I tried to forget about it and just keep on my way best I could. I wanted to get home as quickly as possible. I wanted to get out of this creepy atmosphere and jump back into my bed. This night was way too weird. I'm not sure how much time had passed without me hearing anything. It was really dead quiet outside. I almost began wishing I could hear the tipping and tapping of the walking come back. It seemed like just shortly after I thought that, I actually did hear a tapping, walking sound on the road, only this time it was right behind me. Before I had a chance to react at all, I felt something suddenly touch my shoulder. I jumped forward in surprise, almost dropping my bicycle on the ground. I was able to turn around though and see something I never expected. I saw a human arm extending towards me in the fog. The fog was so thick that was all I could see though. Whoever the arm belonged to, they were completely enveloped in the fog around us. I didn't have much time to think. I only had time to react, and so I did something I hadn't expected to do. I immediately jumped onto my bicycle. Even though I had almost no visibility and the road was coated in ice, I didn't care at this point. I began riding the bicycle as fast as I could, booking it to get home. I almost took a bad spill many times, but I didn't wait for anything, and I didn't look back even once. I just kept riding as hard as I can until I got all the way home. When I did arrive home, I dropped my bicycle at the door and ran inside. I locked the door and sprinted to my room, locking that door too. It wasn't until I was in my bed that I had a few moments to put everything together in my mind. Whoever had been walking toward me on the road had obviously stepped off to the side at some point. They kept out of sight distance and come up from behind me to try and grab me from behind. I can only assume this person's intentions were not good. Why else would they have snuck up behind me like they had? I don't know who it was or what it was all about, but I've often seen that arm in my dreams since then, reaching out to grab me from out of that dark and thick fog. To preface this post, I grew up in an upper-middle-class family. My dad was a young professional, and my mom was next level taking care of 3 kids and being a GM for my dad. Shit completely hit the fan and they divorced. At this point in time, I was in junior high, grade 7 or 8 I believe, and had recently gotten bus privileges. I was busing to school back and forth on my own with no issues. Being an independent teacher, I thought I was giving my mom a good break, especially since she was a single mom with 3 kids. Now, the bus picked me up and dropped me off at the exact same spot every time, an intersection on a main road, which intersected with my residential road. It was literally only a 1-minute walk over to my house. Growing up, my mom had instilled to us the fears of stranger danger. Yet, despite that, I'd led a fairly sheltered life up to that point. I was overall a very talkative and nice kid. I could strike up a conversation with anybody, and usually my guard wasn't really up per se. I tended to just trust everyone, even if I'd just met them for the very first time. On this fateful late afternoon, the bus dropped me off at the usual spot. I was minding my own business, walking toward my side street, when suddenly I heard the voice of a woman calling out to me. "Little boy, it's cold outside." I turned around, and that's when I saw a white cargo van. There was a woman practically leaning out the car window. She was dressed rather nice, all black, fairly young, big nice smile. The cargo van doors then completely swung open, and she was leaning out of them. I strongly believe in a sixth sense, your gut, intuition, whatever you want to call it. And in this instant, my gut was telling me to get out of there right now, to walk faster and create some distance from this person. "It's so cold outside, isn't it? Let us drive you over to your house." "No, it's fine. My house is just down the street." I pointed over in that direction. She was very persistent, though. The van sped up and slowed down next to me, and she leaned out further. I was practically walking on the gravel to avoid her at this point. She kept on talking to me, but I was no longer listening to what she was saying. I wanted to get a better look. I wanted to see what she was trying to hide inside that cargo van. You see, she was leaning in a very weird way, in which she was obstructing my view of what was inside. As I walked, she kept on shifting. I managed to sprint just fast enough to get ahead of her. And that's when I saw him. There was a man crouched down behind her just out of view. I remember seeing his body. He was tensed and ready to pounce. When I saw him, that's when everything sank in. These people were trying to grab me. I'll never forget the face that woman made. She went from a cheerful and happy smile to instantly sour and aggravated. She dropped her acting right away and slammed the door. Then they sped off. As an adult, I'm convinced this was a planned act of opportunity. Around that time, we had a series of kidnappings in my city and town. All kids my age, reportedly by the same white cargo van. In this instance, they'd followed a bus and just waited for the perfect moment to strike. I could have very easily been one of those missing kids on a milk box. I still get chills when I think about it to this day. In my early 20s, I landed a receptionist job in a sales office at a manufactured housing community. It was my first office job after working in daycare and the food and drink industry. Honestly, I was really excited. I greeted potential buyers, set up appointments, and staged the spec homes with our stock of furniture and decorations. I worked with one other person in the office, who was the salesman. When he was out, I took potential buyers through our spec homes and gathered their information for follow-up. I was working alone one day when a customer came into the office looking to potentially purchase his first home. I gathered some information from this young man and asked if he would like to take a look at some spec homes. As we walked down the sidewalk towards the row of homes, we chatted about the various floor plans and finishes available. I knew the product information and had no trouble confidently answering his questions. He was friendly and honestly reminded me of a classmate I knew from high school that had played offense on the football team. I decided to show him the 2 home models that best fit his price range and desired floor plan. Since I'd shared most of the technical information during the first home tour, I gave him some space to freely look around the second home. He walked through the main living area and stopped in the doorway to one of the back bedrooms. He called out to me, "Hey, what's this back here?" He pointed to the corner of the room. I couldn't see anything in there from where I was standing. I knew these floor plans by heart, so I politely answered that it was a closet. In my mind, I was sarcastically thinking, "Really? You don't know what a closet is?" The man chuckled and asked again, "No, really, come here. What's this in the closet back here?" I could tell by his tone he really wanted me to come see for myself. He motioned for me to come closer and take a look. His tone was friendly, but his request didn't make much sense. I paused, a bit confused. In that split second, something shifted. Maybe it was the energy in the air, but the hairs on my neck were now standing straight up. The way he was looking at me changed right in front of me. I suddenly sensed that something was off here. I did not feel safe any longer. With all the lightheartedness I could muster, I repeated to him, "Oh, that's just a closet. Excuse me for a moment, I need to go check on something outside." I quickly made my exit to the sidewalk outside the house. I had no concrete reason for why I felt the overwhelming need to leave that house immediately. I didn't understand why my body sensed so much danger. I just knew I needed to get away from there. Over the next few days, the young man came back to the office to meet with the salesman. He filled out all the various paperwork needed to purchase a home and live within the community. He dropped by several more times unannounced to check on his application status. If I wasn't there, he would ask the salesman when I worked next, though. My coworker just thought I had a not-so-secret admirer. I couldn't shake the overwhelming feeling, though, that something was wrong with this guy. On nights I worked alone, I locked the office door from then on. A few days later, corporate sent back their analysis of this young man's application and the completed background check. He had been denied. The background check revealed multiple sexual assault and rape convictions. There it was, crystal clear, undeniable, 20/20 hindsight. The salesman called the customer right away to let him know the application had been denied and we would do nothing further for him. A few days later, the young man decided to come back to the office one more time. When my coworker saw the young man's vehicle turn into our parking lot, he told me to go to the back room of the office, where I could hide out of sight. Just like the times before, the young man entered the office and asked if I was working that day. This time, though, he was met by a very angry, large salesman that had nothing to lose. I had never heard my coworker raise his voice before, but on that day, his voice was angry as the heavens. Needless to say, the young man never came by again, and I wasn't scheduled to work alone nearly as often. I was always left with a lot of responsibility when I was a kid. I was the oldest of 4 children, and even from a really young age, I had to be responsible for all of my siblings. I was babysitting them when I was young enough to need a babysitter myself. However, my parents always insisted I knew better, and that I had to be responsible for all the other children, basically whenever they didn't want to be. We lived in an old house out in the hills for my entire childhood. We had one car, which we had for years and years that I remember. It was old and probably not the best vehicle to be driving around in bad weather. That meant if my parents were out, they wouldn't always come home if the weather was too bad. It wasn't unusual that I would be home alone with the other kids overnight, and sometimes even longer. This happened one winter when I was about 12 years old. My parents had gone over to some relative's house to hang out, drink, and do that sort of thing. I can't recall who it was, but that's not the part of the story that matters. This was the sort of thing that the adults in my family did every weekend before driving home, likely very drunk. I was at home with the other kids, and I had to prepare dinner for them and keep them all entertained. Luckily, it was a Friday night, so I didn't have to worry about getting them in bed too early. The kids all liked staying up late on a Friday night and watching some Johnny Carson before bedtime. My parents weren't home when the school bus dropped us off. There was a note on the fridge to contact the Meeks family down the street if anything were to happen. They were a bit of a ways up the hill from us, though, so we really didn't ever contact them for any reason. As I mentioned before, I was supposed to know better and thus be able to take care of all the others no matter what happened. It began snowing not long after we got home. It seemed light at first and like it might not stick, but I was sure wrong about that. The snow began falling pretty heavily, and it definitely was sticking. It began to pile up pretty quickly. It wasn't long until I got the call from the parents, letting us know they would be staying the night over at the relative's house. They had been drinking too much, and it would be even more dangerous than usual to drive up. No big deal. I was expecting this to happen anyway. I put the 2 younger children to bed after Johnny Carson and let my 10-year-old brother stay up with me. Honestly, I didn't want to be up by myself, and he and I always got along very well. I don't know if this is just in retrospect due to what else happened that night, but I recall this really creepy feeling that I couldn't identify for some reason. It made me feel much safer to have someone else up with me. I kept on getting up and checking the weather. The front window looked out onto the yard, but it was hard to see much looking out there right now. We had a light on the front porch, which we always had to leave on when we were home alone, but the snow was so thick that we couldn't see anything out there. It was way too thick. It was pretty late, and my brother and I were up later than we usually would have tried to stay awake. There were some Christmas specials on TV, and although the reception wasn't so good, it wasn't something we noticed back then. All TV that far out in the country got some real fuzzy reception. Suddenly, out of nowhere, we heard this loud crashing noise. The couch we were sitting on was up against the same wall as the window. We had to turn around in order to see that the window had just been busted open. The scariest part, though, was that we noticed an arm coming through the broken open window. That terrified us both, and we jumped off the couch in a hurry. My little brother jumped and ran out of the room faster than I could have imagined. I don't blame him, though. I was 12 years old and terrified. I could only imagine how scared a 10-year-old would be. He was also much faster than I was at getting out of that room. I got off the couch and looked back at the window, wondering what it was that I was supposed to do. I saw a guy I didn't recognize looking in. He saw me standing there and looked surprised to see me. Looking back, I think he may have thought no one was home because of there being no vehicle in the driveway. It didn't make sense he would be trying to rob this house out in the middle of nowhere, though. At least it didn't make much sense to me at the time. If he were a robber, I guess it's possible he thought it would take much longer for the police to arrive. My little brother ran into the room with my dad's rifle, surprising me because I thought he wasn't going to come back. We were all taught to shoot at a very young age, so I guess I can understand why he went after the gun. I thought he would be found hiding under the bed or in the closet. The guy standing in the window saw that gun and immediately retreated backward. I ran over to the door and looked out through it. Although it was hard to see what was happening due to the falling snow, I could see the man retreating into it. It only took a few moments, though, before he was completely lost in the torrent of falling snow. We did our best to cover up the window, but we were mostly just worried about whether the man was going to come back and try another entrance or something. My brother and I went around to make sure the doors and windows were all locked. Then we sat together on the couch in fear of that guy coming back. We kept the rifle right by us, and eventually both fell asleep on the couch together. The guy never did come back. The following morning, the snow was higher than I'd ever seen before. There was no way our parents would be able to get back that day. In fact, it took them many days before they were able to. Fortunately, we didn't have any further problems during that time. My mom was kind of a witch when I was growing up, although I didn't really realize that at the time. She expected me to do a lot of things you probably shouldn't have a younger kid do. This is a story of something that happened one of the times she made me do this. We lived in a holler during this time period. It was a few miles away from her mother's trailer, which was the next house down the road. We didn't have a car, so whenever we went to see Grandma, we had to walk there. Grandma had a car and would take us into town whenever she needed to do it. This happened on a really cold and snowing winter night when I was about 10 years old. My mom was making something for dinner, and she needed to have cornmeal to make cornbread. Our stepfather was a real asshole, and for some reason he insisted on having cornbread with every meal. If he didn't get exactly what he wanted, he could get very violent. Even though it was late, dark, and cold, my mom sent me over to my grandma's house to grab some cornmeal. I got bundled up as best I could. We were so poor that we didn't have much, though. I went out into the cold and snow in order to grab that cornmeal. It was the coldest I had ever remembered it being in that area before. I had never felt anything like it. My poor clothing was hardly any sort of protection against these elements. It was snowing real hard, and it was hard to even move in all this snow. I was having a much more difficult time than usual trying to make this walk. It was the hardest I'd ever had to take, and I knew it was going to take forever as well. Because of this, I kept getting colder and colder. It wasn't very long before I actually began to get a little lightheaded too. I thought maybe it was too cold to be out in that weather, and thought about turning back. I knew that if I did though, the wrath of my stepfather would be a whole lot worse than the cold, so I kept trudging onward. I kept feeling weaker and weaker, but I tried my best to make it to Grandma's house, where I knew I would be safe. The further I went, though, the less it seemed I was going to be able to make it. At some point, my memory went blank. I remember walking in the cold, but it seems like everything just went dark at some point. I don't even remember exactly what point that was. Next thing I knew, I woke up in the hospital. I was much warmer than I was before, but I didn't even remember being out in the snow immediately. It took me a while to remember very much of anything, really. I guess I had passed out in the snow and fallen on the side of the road. If it hadn't been for a car happening to drive down that road and noticing me, even though I had been covered by snow by that point, I probably would have died that night. Fortunately, someone much kinder than my mom and stepfather noticed me, stopped the car, and took me to the hospital. I recovered fully, but was treated like crap by my stepdad for quite a while for being too much of a wimp to make it to Grandma's house. He used to mock me for it all the time. The story does have a happy ending, though. That asshole accidentally killed himself while working on a car. I won't go into too much detail about that, but I think I gave you a good idea of what kind of man he was. No one really missed him all that much. I had just gotten out of high school and was cleaning out my closet a bit. I decided to post an ad on Craigslist. The title, Teen Girl Clothes for Sale. I did receive a few creepy messages, but nothing too scary. I needed the money real bad, so I waited a few days for a more serious buyer. And that's when an Annie emailed me. Her message said something along the lines of, "Hey, can you meet me in the Walmart parking lot? I'd like to buy all of your clothes today." I was so eager to get rid of all this stuff, but I didn't want to go to a parking lot alone. I asked my mom to come with me, and she agreed. I let Annie know that I could meet sometime between 5 and 7. When she asked for my phone number, I gave it to her to facilitate easier contact. Back then, I gave my number to just about anyone who asked for it. I don't really do that so much these days. So I'm texting this girl trying to arrange a time to meet when she tells me that she has to wait for her mom to get home from work so she can drive her to Walmart. I immediately felt a bit relieved. I was thinking to myself, okay, great. She's bringing her mom, I'm bringing mine, we're meeting in public. Surely all will be good. All was not good, of course. We agreed to meet up at 6:30 on the far right side of the parking lot. I was excited to get rid of all this old junk and get some fairly decent money, too. We headed to the side of Walmart, parked there, and waited. I texted her and let her know that we were already there. The first red flag to leave should have been her immediate reply. "Are you alone? What kind of car are you driving?" I told her and also let her know I was with my mom. There was no response to this. At this point, it was getting quite dark, and I was looking around the parking lot to see if I could find her. That was when I spotted him. A young man not too much older than me, in a white Nissan parked in the aisle before us, his window halfway down, and staring directly at us. I asked my mom, "Hey, you see that guy? Why is he staring? How much longer should we wait here for Annie?" She casually glanced in his direction. Up to this point, we had both been on our phones, not paying too much attention to anyone around us. I've since learned more about the term situational awareness. Pay attention to your surroundings, people. I figured she would text me when she was almost there, but there had been no further communication, so I called her. No answer. The man in the aisle over rolled down his window all the way, still staring, and started to blow bubbles. It was so weird, like actual bubble blowing. I could even see him holding the container, blowing these bubbles in our direction. He paused and smiled. Not a warm smile, but a sinister one. My mom and I took one look at each other, and I started the car. We began to put the pieces together, and we realized that this man in front of us was probably Annie. Not only did he have my phone number, but now he also knew my car's license plate number. I was trying my best not to freak out. He saw us pulling out of the parking lot and stepped out of his car. He stared us down while we hauled us out of there. I was just praying he wouldn't try to follow us, and thankfully he did not. I guess seeing me with my mom threw him off. He thought I would be alone that night, and I'm grateful I wasn't. I blocked the number, and I never received further contact from Annie. Needless to say, I did not end up selling my clothes that day, and I have not been on Craigslist ever since. This happened about 8 years ago in my local supermarket. I, female and 36 at the time, was in the queue to pay. It was Saturday morning, super busy, and I was second in line. In front of me at the till was a family of 3, a mom, a dad, and a daughter. Mom and dad were unpacking the trolley, and the daughter was sitting in the trolley seat facing me. Behind me were these 2 men, and they were making me super uncomfortable. They were standing way too close to me and not respecting my personal space at all. You know when you feel someone before you actually see them? It was kind of like that. I was facing the daughter and she looked super uncomfortable as well. She kept making herself smaller and looking over her shoulder to Dad. I turned around and noticed these men were waving and smiling, trying to get her attention. One guy even reached around me and grabbed her foot. He did it in such a familiar way that I thought he must have known the family. She flinched away though, and he tried to do it again. The girl quietly called for her father. The dad swung around and said in a booming voice something along the lines of, "What the hell, dude? Don't touch my daughter." The weirdo just said, "But we want to be friends with her." The dad said he didn't know them and to back off. I realized they didn't know each other at all and instantly went into mommy mode. The dad went back to unpacking the trolley, but this time I positioned myself between the 2 guys and the daughter, completely blocking access to her. Believe it or not, these 2 creeps were still trying to get her attention again, so this time I said really loudly, "You're so lucky to have such a brave and strong dad. Look at how he's protecting you from these bad men." The dad looked at me and we had a silent conversation with our eyes. They packed up and left quickly. I thought it was over now. The girl was safe and I had to unpack my things and go home. As I was unpacking my trolley though, I suddenly noticed that one of the men had moved around and was standing at the end of the till, staring at me with pure malice in his eyes. The other guy was still standing behind me. There was only my trolley between us. I won't lie, in that moment I did feel a bit intimidated. I'm not a small person by any means. I'm tall-ish with broad shoulders and quite strong as well. In my trolley was 15 kilograms of dog food. My adrenaline was pumping. I needed to do something to show these guys I was not an easy target. I made eye contact with that aggressor at the end of the till and lifted up my bag of dog food like it was made of toilet paper. I did my best to not change my expression at all. I kept eye contact with him and flexed my muscles as well. Now I was angry. I paid and he tried to block my exit. I shoved my trolley right into him. He laughed menacingly and moved out of the way. I decided not to go straight to my car. I walked around the mall a bit. Every time I turned around, there they were, now with a 3rd guy. They were not even hiding the fact they were following me at this point. One guy even made a motion of cutting my neck. At this point, I just started making my way to the security desk. When I got there, I turned around and they were gone. I told the security everything. They recommended I let the supermarket know as well. I gave them my till number so they could review the security tape above the till. A guard escorted me to my car. I drove home the long way, checking my rearview mirror constantly. I never saw them again, but to be honest, I stopped going to that supermarket after. Partly because of this incident, but mainly because their prices are not very competitive, and my dogs are very fussy eaters. So this happened about 4 years ago. My dad works nights, so I'm home alone until about 2:30 a.m. most days. We live in a pretty quiet area where people usually keep to themselves. One night, at around 1 in the morning, there was a sudden knock at the door. When I checked out my peephole, I could see there was a young woman with her car parked near the curb in front of my house. I answered, and she looked really young, just about 15 or 16, very youthful looking. In short, I didn't even know if she looked old enough to be driving. She told me she was having some car trouble and asked if I could come check it out for her and possibly give her car a jump. At this time, though, I didn't drive, have a car of my own, or know much about cars at all. I would be of little help in a situation such as this. I offered to call someone if she needed, though, AAA or even a tow service. She declined and kept insisting that I check out the lights on her dashboard to see if everything looked normal. At this point, I didn't want to go outside with a stranger, so I politely informed her I didn't think I could help her. I just had no knowledge of cars. I went back inside and kept looking out through the peephole. She opened the back door, got into the back seat, and the car drove off immediately. It instantly made my stomach drop and made me extremely freaked out. I was kind of distraught actually, thinking about what the real reason was to approach my house. Who was driving? The entire thing left me confused and frightened. I spent the next few days a little on edge. I was afraid they may return, knowing that someone was there or that I would be home alone. I also thought a lot about that girl and who she was. I wish I had a video doorbell at the time so I could find out if she was a victim or some sort of, I don't know even. It still bothers me a lot, and the whole encounter was eerie as hell. About 2 years ago, I was staying up late, around 2 a.m. or so, when suddenly someone started knocking on my door and begging for help. I didn't answer because I'm a very petite woman and I don't really trust the people in my neighborhood. We have security cameras outside that see pretty much every angle outside of our house. I pulled up the app and could see it was a woman that was probably in her late 20s or early 30s. I didn't recognize her from around these parts, so I didn't answer. She kept knocking and asking for help, asking if anyone was home. Finally, she appeared to walk away, and then I heard the screen door under my carport open. She started knocking on that door and even jiggling the doorknob as well. At this point, I woke my husband up, and he came to check out the situation. She was already gone by the time he got out there, though. A few minutes later, she appeared again. First the front door, then trying the side door, then back again. This time, I just called the police, and an officer came out to speak with us and check the situation. He actually found her still there, hiding in some bushes just down the street. He said we were very wise not to open the door and let her in, because he recognized her, and she had a long list of priors for robbery and assault. This happened when I was 10 years old. I was at a ski resort with my dad, stepmom, and 3 sisters. When this happened, my 2 sisters, dad, and stepmom were all out skiing. Me and my sister Ava got cold though, so we went back to the hotel to get some food. We sat down at the restaurant inside until my stepmom came down. We asked her if she could hold the table for us so we could go up to the room quickly and drop off all our ski gear. We took the elevator, and once we got off, we started the walk to our room. And that's when I heard someone behind me call out to us. Keep in mind, we were both 11 at the time, so I didn't really think he would be talking to us. We just sort of ignored him. We walked into our room, but before we could shut the door closed, a man stepped into the doorway. He was really tall, probably about 6 feet. He looked to be maybe in his early 60s or late 50s. He was wearing this hotel staff uniform, but something was wrong with it. It didn't appear to have all the logos it was supposed to. The thing that really raised a big red flag, though, was that he was wearing black surgical gloves for no reason. "Hey, I was talking to you." We spun around, caught off guard. "Us?" "Yeah, you. I was wondering if you could grab a pitcher for me and come to my room to pour some water." Our parents had told us never to trust strangers, and we were already getting a bad vibe from this guy. We tried to decline him. His tone then got very annoyed. "Come on, it will take just a second. Come pour me some water in my room." At this point, we already knew this was not a right situation, so we said no again. This conversation went back and forth for about 3 minutes until he tried to force his way into our room. Our instincts kicked in at this point. I ran full speed towards the door and body slammed the door into him. Ava and I sat in the hotel room for about 10 minutes, panicking on how we were going to leave to tell our parents about this. We had left our phones downstairs with my stepmother. We looked at the people. The man was gone, so we bolted down the hallway and ran back down the stairs to the restaurant. Once we told our stepmom, she was mortified and went to office security. They interviewed us and asked for a description because they didn't have any cameras in the hallway. We gave them a description of the man, and they told us that nobody with that description even worked there, and most people were young broke college students. At this point, it really set in that if we had tried to help him, we might have died or worse. What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here. Thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. If you liked the video, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you feel so inclined. If you have any feedback for me as well, be sure to leave that in comments below the video. If you guys have a story you'd like to send in, or if you'd like to contact me for any reasons, there will be links to my social media in the description below the video, including my Facebook, Gmail, and Twitter accounts. Go ahead and send me a message on any of those, and I'll try to get to you as soon as possible. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include in the tagline what the name of the story is if it has one, what type of story it is if it has one, and how you'd like to be credited in the description below the video. Please make sure to include as much detail as you feel comfortable with and try to use as much proper grammar as possible to make sure you have the highest chance of appearing in a future video. Overall, I think that's pretty much it for now, guys, so thank you so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.